So good morning. In the first place, huge thanks to the Academy, to the Center for the Thought of John Paul II, and your occupation for this lovely invitation and gathering. Truly delighted to be here representing the Laudato Si movement. So few words, just for starters, just to share two expressions from Pope Francis, maybe to help frame my remarks. First one, this lovely quote from Laudato Si, the Pope writes, "We know that things can change." This really profound statement and this hope-filled spirit of Laudato Si, that despite the challenges that we face, we know that things can change. And yeah, I urge this. I think we have to keep that alive when we discuss this heavy, challenging problems we face. Just reminding ourselves of the room for hope and the need for hope. And second, at the same time, just the realism that we are at the edge, or truly at the edge. So Pope Francis, thank you. Pope Francis, just this last Earth Day, very strongly said we are truly at the edge. And this interconnected crisis we're facing, climate, social, health crisis we're facing, and the moral crisis that is underneath those crises, bringing them all together and exacerbating them. So that said, about how we're truly at the edge, first highlighting just the last few weeks or the last few months of extreme, truly horrendous extreme weather events that we've faced. Here in Italy, the unprecedented fires, droughts, just let's say Europe's highest temperature ever recorded, close to 50 degrees Celsius in Sicily. The earth is crying out big time. And then this is just the example of Italy because I live here. But we've seen images all over the place again and again from all corners of the globe. This June, July, August, and September were just horrific. Floods, hurricanes, wildfires, droughts. Now have Madagascar. We have the first climate-only driven famine in history. We have close to 500,000 people in Madagascar on the brink of famine because crops are failing, and so on and so forth. So this extreme weather events that are more likely and more intense because of human-induced climate disruption. At the same time, we're also seeing the natural world ecosystems starting to break apart. We're seeing, just to start, like speaking about other creatures, we've lost in the last 50 years, 68%, so 7 out of 10 creatures out there, wild creatures, wiped out in 50 years, and so on and so forth. So needless to say, the need to be realistic about the crisis we're facing is important and absolutely necessary. At the same time, needless to say, when these foundations for life to flourish in this planet are compromised, of course, humanity itself is compromised. And here, again, quoting Pope Francis recently stated, "We must care for nature so that nature may care for us." But at the same time, so that's obviously a principle that people are starting to awaken to. But of course, then Pope Francis adds, and Laudato Si expands at length, that it's not just about protecting ourselves, that we're just hoping that ecosystems don't break apart just so we are not damaged. It's that as people of faith, we know that other creatures have the right to exist. As beloved creatures of God, they have intrinsic value. And just by their very existence, they give praise to the Creator. So with that in mind, the urgency of the upcoming UN summits, we have COP26 around the corner, starting in a few weeks. In Glasgow, we have COP15 in China that will start in October, but because of the pandemic, it's being postponed till early next year. the importance of this UN processes cannot be stated enough. And in this context also, worth reminding ourselves, some time ago, the head of the UNHCR, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Andrew Harper, on one side stating that 90% of refugees today, 90% are coming from climate vulnerable countries. So the impact of climate already in this huge migration flows is just gigantic. And he said that the agency, the UN Refugees Agency, is preparing for worst case scenarios of this refugee flows just, let's say, going exponentially bigger, because the unlikelihood of national governments meeting their climate targets. We're seeing that they're not on track to deliver on the Paris Agreement. So a stark reminder of the UNHCR saying, like, we're truly preparing for the very worst. But that said, even if they're doing their job, preparing for the worst, we can absolutely not let that become a reality. So the urgency of, despite them preparing for the worst, we truly have to do our very best to ensure that that's not the case. And so indeed, this is where, just to follow on the wonderful presentations earlier, the importance to reimagine the paradigm, and knowing that this deep and systemic changes are possible, they are within reach. The social structures, we're told that things, the social structures, economic structures, and so on cannot change, but they're human-made. So yes, they can be changed, absolutely can be changed. And we've seen the velocity and scale of change in this last pandemic when people and governments realized the severity of a threat. So if we apply the same, let's say, mindset to the, let's say, maybe more gradual threat of the climate and ecological breakdown, we can absolutely change the systems. And in that regard, here also mentioning the latest IPCC report, which I think now, thinking also about Europe, the latest IPCC report just last August, so a month and a half ago, we saw the most severe warning that a UN intergovernmental panel could issue. And we've seen Antonio Guterres issuing this code red for humanity. All scenarios projected by the IPCC, all of them, even the most optimistic ones, have seen that within 2 decades, we'll already cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, which we know will be catastrophic for many regions of the planet. And all these tipping points that we're just about to cross, be it on the forest side, being on Antarctic sheets, ice sheets, et cetera, et cetera. And in other words, the alarm bells being rung by scientists couldn't be louder. And it's not only the scientists, it's young people in the streets, it's the poor that are crying out. All of this reminders of the urgency couldn't be greater. And here's what's just perplexing, that despite all this science and all this loud cries, we see, for example, the UN General Assembly just a few weeks ago, all this nice rhetoric, but as Greta Thunberg has put it so starkly just a few weeks ago in the pre-COP, this is all blah, blah, blah. We're seeing these nice promises and nice words from political leaders. They're just not matched by their actions. Actually, they're absolutely doing exactly the contrary. So what about Europe? What has changed in Europe since the IPCC report went out? I mean, in terms of EU member states, like, has there been any conversation about moving up earlier dates for ending coal and engaging unions in this transition? I think we haven't seen that. What about massive fossil fuel infrastructure projects here in Europe, like the Trans-Adriatic pipeline here in southern Italy, locking in decades of more emissions? Nothing has changed after the IPCC report. And again, it's not just after the IPCC report, it's in the lead up to COP26 and this new NDCs. which member states of the European Union have revised their energy subsidies so that families don't have to choose between protecting their family from the cold of the winter and protecting those same children from climate breakdown? What about France, architect and champion of the Paris Agreement, with this climate law being negotiated now? And we're seeing that, unfortunately, powerful economic interests still get on the way. What about Italy here, where we're currently sitting? We haven't seen any changes in degree of ambition since this latest report either. What about so many other countries? I don't know, we have several Polish friends here as well. What about Poland itself? What changes in the ambition and action that is needed to live up to these goals and guarantee a just transition for workers? We haven't seen much progress in the last few weeks as well. So anyways, needless to say, absolutely no member state in Europe is off the hook. None is immune, and all of them must fulfill their responsibilities. And also thinking at the EU level, like what, in terms of the council, for example, revising the collective target to 65% to reflect the fair share of Europe, to remain under 1.5. Has there been any movement of the council asking the commission to come up with a new legislative package to deliver on higher ambition?
We need to have some space.
Yeah,
some discussion.
Totally. So in other words, what we're seeing is that action is unfortunately not happening. The scale of, in other words, the gap between words and action is way far beyond behind what's needed. So anyways, and last but not least, and I'll close with this, in terms of the role of Europe as well in the global scheme of things, the Pope Francis likes to remind us of the ecological debt of wealthy countries towards the global south. And we still see that despite promises made of financial and technological support to the global south, that's still not materializing either. So, and it's not solidarity, it's just a basic matter of justice. It's repaying this ecological debt. So needless to say, the work ahead for Europe is gigantic. And I speak here as a non-European. There was an earlier comment about everybody here in the room being from Europe. I'm not from Europe, I'm from Argentina, but I live in Europe. So well, anyways, the role of Europe is just so essential. I truly hope that, and Europe will not be able to solve the climate crisis by itself, but it's absolutely essential for this collective solution. So I hope that Europe indeed can lead the way, showing how these crises are interconnected and taking decisive action. So thank you very much.